designer with a background in architecture, industrial design, and writing who launched Project H with $1,000 in her parents' dining room in order to not only talk about making humanitarian change, but act on it and empower communities to do so as well. She has continued to inspire and make changes through her book, Design Revolution, 100 Products that Empower People. She founded Studio H, a high school design film program in Bertie County, North Carolina, and now Girls Garage in Unprofessional Development. Emily has had an amazing impact on humanitarian design and empowered so many. Here she is.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Am I on?
Yes.
Yes? Hi.
Hi.
So many of you, I'm so glad you're here. No, I'm not on. Hold on. Oh, no, I am. Okay, great. Thanks. All right, so I'm really excited to be here. I have a couple very old friends who invited me to be here, and I know there's a lot of other things we could be doing on a Friday night, so I'm very appreciative that you chose, or were forced to be here. Either way. So I thought that I would just tell you some stories about the work that I've done and some of the lessons that I've learned after the fact. Of course, you don't realize those things when you're doing the work, but only after you're like, oh, that was a lesson. So I want to share those lessons. And then we'll definitely have time after for any questions, burning questions that you have. So let's go. So thank you so much for the intro. I am the founder of this organization called Project H, and I'll talk about how that came about from really having zero knowledge or any sense about how to run a business, but wanting to do work that matters. And I've only interacted with a few of you all today so far, but I get the sense that that is something that most of you are, it's of a high priority, that you want to do work that matters. And so it's not often an easy thing to carve out for yourself within an industry, but it is possible, and I'm going to show you how I made it possible for myself, and hopefully leave you with some ideas as to how to do that in your own career. So let me start at the very beginning. When I was 10 years old, this guy was on TV. There's a new version of MacGyver that's on now, and it sucks.
Yeah.
So, in 1993, 4, somewhere in there, actually earlier than that, MacGyver was on TV. If you haven't seen MacGyver, he was this very dreamy, spy / Russian hunter kind of guy. He was always chasing the latest bad guy. He worked with the Phoenix Foundation. And I had a huge crush on him for obvious reasons, but this was also the first time I had ever seen on TV and fictitiously, but it's the first time I ever saw him solving problems in a different way than I had experienced in my own life. So you go to school, there's a very specific way in which you're taught how to do math problems, everything feels very linear, and even though you have playtime as a kid, you don't really have a sense of what creativity looks like in a specific way. And so I remember watching MacGyver and thinking that there might be other ways to solve problems than what I was being shown how to do. So you could say he was the original thinker. But anyway, he would solve all these crazy problems with minimal tools and get himself out of situations that were really sticky. So I remember thinking that there was something more for me to learn about how to solve problems. I also had two of the most amazing grandmothers. My mother is Chinese and my father is French. So this is my Chinese grandmother and my French grandmother. They were both fiercely independent women. They're both incredibly creative. My grandmother on the right, my French grandmother, she used to do these gorgeous needlepoint and cross stitchings that, most people that do needlepoint or cross stitch, you buy a pattern and you put it on the thing and you do it. She would make her own patterns and do these really intricate, beautiful, abstract pieces. And then my grandmother on the left is holding a saw that she plays as a musical instrument. Have anyone heard a saw played as a musical instrument? They play the weirdest thing ever. So my grandmother would bust out the saw at Thanksgiving dinner. And so I loved like grandma to play this thing like musical instrument, and she was also about this tall, and she was just amazing like that, and she didn't care. So these are the first two women in my life, aside from my mother, who also showed me what it looked like to have a creative practice and to live in a creative way. And then I had some of the most phenomenal high school teachers. I had a lot of really great teachers throughout my young years, but these were the first teachers I had my junior year of high school who called me out for being a nerd in a good way and said it's okay to be a nerd and it's okay to be a nerd about everything. This was like around the time, I'm sure you remember, being a junior in high school when everyone was asking me, what are you going to study, where are you going to go to school, when are you going to take the SATs? And I remember thinking, I love math, I love art, I love reading, I play like 5 sports, like how would I ever choose? And so these people said to me, it's okay to be a nerd, it's okay to be a nerd about everything, and you will find something that will allow you to continue to be a nerd about everything. So that thing for me was architecture. And so I went to, after my junior year, I raised a bunch of money by like selling cookies and begging my parents' friends for money. And I paid for myself to go on this youth trip to Belize, and I learned how to build. And this was like this funny little gazebo that we built. I lived in this little town for about 4 weeks. And we built this little gazebo, we built a whole park. We worked on some house repair with some of the families there. And so I learned like how to actually build stuff with drawings and some level of engineering. And I was hooked. I was like, this is where I get to be a nerd. I can think about science, I can think about math and why something stands up, and I can also go have conversations with human beings and be in a conversation with them about how to build and why we're building and what we're building. So all of this added up to, of course at the time I didn't know this, but now looking back it makes perfect sense that I would be doing the work that I'm doing now. Somewhere in between this moment and 2008, I actually fell out of love with architecture. So I went to Belize, I learned how to build, I went to UC Berkeley, I studied architecture, I went to the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, an MFA in design objects / architecture. And then I looked at my statement from the US government and I said, oh my God, I have $80,000 in student loans, I better get a real job. And my mom was like, make sure to get one that has a 401k. What's a 401k? So I went and I did that, and I got a real job, and I had a 401k or 403b or whatever, and I did that for a little bit, and then I hated it, like hated it. Not just the having a boss thing. I also discovered I don't particularly do well with authority. So that was one piece of it, and the other piece of it was remembering what this felt like. To be engaged in a real community with people, to actually be a part of the building process, like the physical building process. The work that I was doing in a firm was completely disconnected from all of those things. And it felt to me like the opposite reasons for why I fell in love with architecture in the first place. So I had this, the last job I ever had was working at a very large clothing retailer that I won't name, but they're based in San Francisco, and they make a lot of jeans. Sister company is Old Navy. Anyway, I was working at that place with this team of store designers, and I was one of the store architects, and I worked there for exactly 2 weeks. Because on the second Tuesday that I was there, I found myself in this meeting where everyone was like vehemently arguing about what doorknobs to choose for the dressing rooms. And I was like, had this like rise out of my body moment, looking down at myself, like, how is this your life? How is this your work? Are you really going to sit here and argue about doorknobs? So I quit the next day. I hadn't even finished my like probationary period. I just was like, I can't do this. So I quit. And then I started Project H. So it took that level of frustration. I actually am very grateful to the time that I spent working in a firm, with a company, boss, I guess, because it allowed me to get to a point where I knew what I didn't want to do. I think it's really hard sometimes to make a decision about the things you want, and it's much easier to decide about the things you don't want, and that can be very instructive. That's what happened to me. So I started Project H knowing exactly what I didn't want to do. And knowing that there was something about the experience that I had as a junior in high school that was not part of my previous work and that was essential to how I wanted to work. So when I founded Project H, as mentioned in my intro, I had $1,000. I moved back in with my parents at 26, which is like not an ideal situation. I do not recommend doing that because I love my parents. And I just knew that I had to do something that would force me to find a way to do this work. So I set this up as a nonprofit. It's like a lot of work. You have to file a lot of paperwork. You have to go to many government offices. But I knew that if it was a legal entity, that I would be forced to figure it out. It wasn't just like a project. I was going to have to report to the IRS at the end of the year that I did X with X amount of money. So that was the birth of Project H. I also had written, before I knew exactly what this thing was going to be, I had written on a napkin like a bunch of random words, like this mind map of what I wanted to do, and there were a lot of H words, including these. So I said, okay, great, there's my company name, and I'll think of something better. And it's been 9 years, and I haven't thought of anything better. So that's Project H. Ta-da! So this is in 2008. So I wanted to share 4 of, like, I think the most milestone projects that I've been able to make happen for myself as part of the organization. These are mostly self-initiated, with an actual client. But 4 projects that I think really taught me something about how to live and work as a designer and feel like I had a purpose and an impact. So the first one, I'll show like the little lessons that I learned, and you'll kind of see how that unfolds. I do think that one thing that I continue to do, and I've been doing since I was like a very young child, is I am very comfortable being uncomfortable, and I think that all of the moments in my life where I've had some kind of breakthrough or payoff or impact have all come out of moments where I was deeply terrified, like absolutely paralyzed and terrified. And that the ability to push through that and do something that feels like it's outside of what's possible were the most important things I've ever done. So I think seeking that out, like when you feel discomfort, to actually continue to go down that road and ask yourself, what is this project or thing trying to teach me? The first project I did under Project H that taught me this lesson was in 2009. So my organization is only a year old. I still, at this point, have like no knowledge about how to do this work as a, romantic. Okay, we're good? Yeah. So I had a year under my belt and did not really have an idea about what the business model was going to be. People would ask me, what's your 5-year plan? I'm like, I don't know what my 5-month plan is. But I did know what I believed, and so I was making decisions based only on that value system. So I got an email from a superintendent of a very rural school district. This is in eastern North Carolina. And I remember getting this email, and I first thought it was spam. And then I started reading it, and it was like, Dear Emily, I saw your work in Well magazine. Would you consider coming to rural North Carolina and helping me fix the school district? And I'm like, who is this guy? Like, what superintendent reads Well magazine, first of all? And what superintendent would like cold call email someone who's running a 1-year-old organization, clearly doesn't know what she's doing yet, to come and save the school district? But there was something about the way it was written. I could tell that this person was like deeply passionate about education and also passionate about design. And he believed there was something to discover there. So this is Dr. Chip Zollinger, the superintendent. He turned out to be one of the most incredible mentors and renegade leaders I've ever gotten to work with. So he invited us down there. This is like fall 2009. And we show up, my former partner, Matt Miller, and I, we show up, and the school district is a disaster. It's like the worst performing school district in the state. The buildings are falling apart. Some of the schools don't have enough human being teachers because they can't recruit enough qualified teachers. So a lot of students are taking all their classes online. Like from start of the day to the end of the day, they don't interact with human beings aside from their fellow classmates. So like just so bad. So we started working with Dr. Zollinger, and we started embarking on actual design projects. We redesigned some of their play structures. We redid their computer labs. We redid the weight room for the football team because like that's the only thing to do on Friday night. So we thought we could best in that experience. We did a graphic rebrand. And then we looked at each other, all three of us, myself, Matt, and Dr. Zollinger, and I remember thinking, like, there has to be something more that we can do than just flying in and doing these projects and leaving. It felt like we could put makeup on it, but it's still what it is. It's still a school system that's falling apart. So I proposed to Dr. Zollinger. This was like really a spur-of-the-moment idea. I was like, well, why don't we move down here and become high school teachers, and we'll teach design. We'll do it in the classroom. And I fully expected him to say, like, that's a good idea, but you have to get certified, you have to do this, and we'll have to petition this. And he said, okay, yeah, great. See you in the fall. So that's how I became a high school teacher. So yeah, this is my moment of like, oh crap, now I have to do this thing that I just proposed, which I believed was a really powerful idea, but I had put it out there like thinking it would be shot down, and then it wasn't. So for those of you who know the program Rural Studio, it's a design build program out of Auburn in Alabama. And so Matt and I were thinking, like, what would be an appropriate experience for high schoolers that would be impactful in the community, that would still teach them something. This is still within a school day, so we can't just be like, oh, it's art class, like, oh, do whatever you want. There was a rigidity that we had to maintain, and also that would be in keeping with what we believe under Project H. So we structured this class, we named it Studio H, and we decided to teach it over the course of 1 year and to build a real project over the following summer. So on the first day of class, again, like I've never taught in my life. I am like terrified. All these teenagers walk in the door and we're looking at each other like, what are we doing here? They're like, what are we doing here? I'm like, what am I doing here? I have no idea. Like, let's have some fun. So we had thought about what the course would feel like, but we had no idea how to manage a classroom, how to keep teenagers safe in that classroom. I mean, there was like an old barn that we took over and turned it into a shop. So I said to them on the first day, we're all in this together. There's a lot of problems that we're going to have to solve together, and we're going to do some great things, and we're going to end up with a piece of architecture, and I promised them that. So the first project that we did, I asked them to design a chicken coop, and the only goal of this project was to completely change what they thought was possible from what they've always seen and done to something that was so far outside of like outer space, like I wanted their whole universe to be inverted. So I asked them to draw a chicken coop, and what you get when you ask anyone to draw any structure is a square with a roof over it. And I said, okay, now draw me the opposite of that. So we did some version of that, as all of you who have been in any studio know. You do this like 50 times. Someone tells you it sucks, you throw it away, you do another one, someone tells you that sucks, you go get the one from the trash, you bring it back, this was the project. So this is how we ran our studio as well. So these models here, this is from like version 72 of a chicken coop design that was inspired by Buckminster Fuller. And so these are all single pieces of cardboard that were scored and bent, and we were trying to push the boundaries of what geometry could do. Many of my students, I should also say, like didn't know what geometry was. This is like a built-in math lesson. So then we figured out how, well, let me go back. So this one on the lower, actually it's kind of like a hybrid of the lower right and the upper right. This team brought me their final model, and they said, this is the coop we want to build. This is like version 932, we want to build it. And I looked at it, and I remember thinking, that is absolutely amazing, A. B, I have no idea how to build this thing, like none. And because it was flexible, but it was also rigid, I'm like, I don't know how to do that in plywood. I know how to do it in cardboard. So I had this moment where I had to decide if I wanted to be the teacher who said, oh yeah, okay, great, got it, let's go do it. And I instead chose to tell my student that I had no idea, and that we were going to figure it out together, and that I was not going to fail them. I don't mean like give them an F. I mean like I was not going to fail them in that process of figuring it out. But that was like a really key moment for anyone who's interested in doing this type of work with young people or otherwise. That was a really key moment for me where I recognized that my own vulnerability was actually an opportunity to build trust with my students. Because after that, my students saw me as an equal and that we were trying to solve a problem together. And we did solve it. So this was this like sheet metal and plywood situation where we had these like built-in hinges, and this thing was both rigid and it would fold up on itself, which is like many, many prototypes to get this to work. So we had to lift this thing weighed like hundreds and hundreds of pounds. We had to lift it in place. The 2x4s on the wall were our markers to hold specific pieces where they were supposed to be. I did an intro to MIG welding, and we built the structural frame to hold it up. And then we weatherized the roof with this rubberized roof paint. And then this is the final coupe, which they named Coupus Maximus. I don't know why. This is Coupus Maximus, inspired by Buckminster Fuller. And in the background, you can see one of the other ones that was inspired by the verb to twist. That's my dog, Jude. So I think both of these are the third one that's not shown here, but aside from being really cool looking, I ended up with a group of students who totally and completely believed me when I said, we can build whatever crazy ideas you have. They were like, yep, we believe you now. So that was my ultimate goal. I just wanted to have like fully open minds. So then I said to them, all right, we just completed chicken architecture, now we have to build people architecture. That is what we promised we would do, that is what the town wants us to do, and that's what we're going to do. So we started asking a lot of questions. My students all interviewed their families, their neighbors, their relatives, small businesses, farmers, people down the street, people on the street, other teachers. And we just started asking the question, what does the community want and what does the community need? And like categorically, one of the top 3 things that every person would say was, we need a farmer's market. And being from the Bay Area, I was like, oh, farmer's market, schmarmer's market, like they're on every corner. But in rural North Carolina, that's like a really huge revolutionary idea. The closest farmer's market to Windsor, which is the county seat, is 85 miles away. And there was one grocery store, and they were the only grocery store, and they knew they were the only grocery store, so apples were like $6. It was horrible. Total food desert, really high obesity rates, like no public health budget, and you have this agricultural legacy. This is a farming community. So this made sense on so many levels, and there were so many people who, for various reasons, were really into this, whether they were a farmer, or a small business person, or the mayor, or whatever. Like everyone was on board. So we decided to build a farmer's market. And just like the chicken coop, we made a billion models and tore them apart and looked at precedents and redid them and did them again, and then we showed our work to the town. So this is one of the town council members. His name is Jacques. And there was this empty space downtown, and we knew the person that owned it, so we just put stuff up on the wall one day, and we opened up the doors, and we invited people to come in and give us feedback. And so Jacques came in, and he lives right down the street, and he was talking to Karan, my student, who showed him his design. And I took this picture and didn't really think anything of it, and then I went back and was looking through my pictures like months after, and I stopped at this one, and I realized the reason why this photo is so special is that here's a kid who almost dropped out of school, who lives in a town of 200 people, in a trailer. And one of the richest men in the county, who's on the town council, who lives in the town center and has a lot of political power. And these are 2 people who never would have met, ever. Like, I would bet my life on it. They would not have met. In a town, in a county that small, they would not have met. And here they are looking at the design for something that they both are like so excited and really wanting to happen for totally different reasons, but they were both in it as like all-in stakeholders. And that was so powerful, and that was the reason, that is one of the reasons why I think we should all be doing design that matters and that has community impact because of these conversations. So then we had to choose a design. I had 13 students, We had 13 designs, and we have one farmer's market. We went through a whole critique process, and we like mushed some of the designs together, and ultimately we came up with this relatively simple design. This was inspired by some of the local architecture. I haven't seen these buildings anywhere else, like anywhere in the country. They have these peanut trailer sheds that have 8 bays, and they pull trailers full of peanuts into them, and they have this really cool butterfly roof. And so one of our students saw one of those, he took a picture of it, and he brought it in. And we started referring to this as vernacular sublime. It has the same sort of like 8-bay rhythm that mirrors that kind of peanut trailer, but it was elevated and different. We did this double height roof, this band of siding that would become a billboard. The lot of land that was given to us to build on was right when we came into town. So this was an opportunity to say, like, welcome to Windsor, come buy kale, or whatever. Like, this became a billboard opportunity. I should also say that, so this is like where we are on May 15th. Like, school's about to get out. This is where we're at. And then come the real constraints. We have $60,000 of grant money that I've raised, which is nothing on a construction site. We have to engineer this thing to, in a hurricane zone, to 110 mile an hour sustained winds, and in a flood zone where the deck of the farmer's market has to be 3 feet above base flood elevation level, which means we have to ramp up to it, and it has to be ADA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I have a construction crew of 16-year-olds. And I have 3 months to build this thing. So like ordinarily, and in my architectural education experience, like this is where the project ends. Like you put your thing out and you get your grade and you get your critique and you go home. This is like the 50-yard line for us. Like this is not even the hard part. But that was what made it so great. So after school got out, everyone else was like on their jet skis and enjoying the summer. And we were on the construction site building this thing and digging holes for like forever. It was horrible. And it was like 110 degrees and like 4,000% humidity and just like the worst conditions to be building in. But I had every student out there and every single one of them showed up and they worked their butts off and they like had cuts and bruises and they were exhausted and they lost weight. But they were there, and they were so committed because this was the thing. They were like, we're not going home. This was a model on our desk. We're not done yet. And it was so incredible to see that kind of commitment. This was basically a long-term homework assignment, and they were like super invested. So we built these are the structural trusses for the main structure. So under North Carolina labor law, you can't be on a construction site under the age of 18 and operate a power tool. So I'm like, okay, what we can do basically nothing with electricity. So we had to assemble these in our shop. These are 27 individual pieces of lumber. We had to assemble them, disassemble them, move them to the site, and reassemble them by hand. I had one kid that turned 18 on like July 15th, and he became like a chop saw guy. Other than that, it was like all hand assembly. It was crazy. Oh, and each one of these trusses, there was like 13 of them, and all of them were different because we were like, oh, let's be clever about this. And so if you're looking at the plan of the building, it's not a perfect rectangle. It has this 7-degree kick so that it's like a nod to Saarinen, whatever. It was clever at the time until we had to do this. But it ended up being really beautiful. It makes for this really cool entry. And anyway, but not fun under North Carolina labor law. So then we built all these trusses and we had to physically raise them into the air. This was my favorite day of any project where the thing is like a living, standing thing in the world, and it's no longer a model. My students on this day were standing back, like wearing their hard hats. It was so cute, and their eyes were like this big, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's real! It's like a real thing." And I should also say that on this same day, so we didn't just have to build a farmers market; we had to start farmers market, like get people to actually sell stuff. So on this day, we had started a temporary farmer's market on the same site, just like a little bit that way. And so this was on a Saturday, and people were coming to the temporary farmer's market and seeing this thing go up into the air at the same time. And it was this incredible, like, passive engagement. Even though they weren't physically building the thing with us, they were walking by it and, like, doing this rubberneck thing, looking at it, and also noticing, okay, that construction crew is male, female, black, white, 16 years old. I'm the forewoman. Like, it was a weird spectacle. But it was amazing because they walked by and they had to engage some part of their mind and ask themselves, like, what's going on here? And also, what assumptions did I have about the young people in my community? And what is this scene doing to uproot those expectations? That was pretty amazing. So yeah, like I said, no power tools. This entire deck was assembled by hand. This is like carpentry 101. They were so committed to precision. It was pretty incredible. So if I asked Jamisha to bring me a joist at 95 7/8, if she brought it to me at 96, then like you've wasted $27 and we have to do it again and all that. So this was like measure thrice, cut once, and they were like really precise and amazing about it. So we put up the siding, and then this is the final structure when we finished it at the end of the summer. On opening day, so this is like September 2011, and all of the temporary vendors who were in the temporary market moved into the building for the first time, and the mayor showed up and gave my students the key to the city. It was so cute. It was like an actual brass key. And it was so funny, he hands it to them, and he's like, "Your key to the city. Oh, and it's also a bottle opener." They're 16 years old. Don't tell them that. But then I took it and it was in my kitchen. So anyway, these students who are like 16 and 17 and one 18-year-old, this is like now a full 12-month project that they've been engaged in. And they had to go back to school, like literally the next day. They did not get a summer. And yet so Karan here in the striped shirt, he said it so well. The mayor got up and said, blah, 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 and keep the city. And Karan took the microphone from him and he said, I did not think this was possible. I almost dropped out of school, and I didn't. And now I'm standing in a building that I constructed, and I'm going to bring my kids back here someday and tell them that I built this. And so that was this was like my proof of concept. This was the first project we did where I felt like, okay, there is a way to do design and architecture that matters, that is non-imperialistic, that feels like really deeply embedded, because now there's a 17-year-old who is proud of where he comes from and feels like he has agency in his own environment. And so that was a really important moment as an organization for us to realize that we were onto something. So then just like a quick sort of epilogue. The following year I had 27 more students, and I asked them the same exact question: what does our community want and what does our community need? And I so wanted to build an animal shelter because there are all these like stray hunting dogs that kept wandering into my yard. It was horrifying. But none of them were into it. They're like, no, we want to build more farmers markets. And I was like, no, I'm done building farmers markets. But they had a really good point. They were like, there's this thing that we know works, and we want to expand that to other parts of the county. So we built these little pop-up, 100 square foot, like anyone could just come and sell whatever they wanted. So this was one of them, and this was another one. With this class, I did Battle of the Sexes. So one of these was built by the male students, and one was built by the female students. Who wants to guess who built this one? Female? This is the boys' project. Which I was like, oh wow, the girls, everything's rational, and it's on a right angle, and it has perfect plans, and everything is like this. And then the boys is this like voluptuous. Like, no, what precedent study did you look at? So yeah, this was like the first thing that I did. It was really, really, I mean, it was intense, it was trying for me, it was very difficult. It felt impossible, and yet I pulled it off. And so I knew that Project H could continue to do this work and could continue to ask questions and push boundaries about how and where to do it. which leads me to story number 2. So after, I won't go into a whole thing, this is like a whole separate presentation, but I left Berkeley County after being there for 3 years. And there was a whole story about the school board and the superintendent left. The parents petitioned for us to stay. We worked for free. It was like a whole thing. So anyway, we left, and parts of that program still remain in various forms, but we left. And when we left, we took the program to a school that is at the total opposite end of the spectrum in pretty much every single way in Berkeley, California. It's a charter school called Realm Charter School, and it's an urban school. They pull mostly students from Richmond and Oakland, majority students of color, majority students who are living at or below the poverty line. And my Latino students in particular, who mostly live in Richmond, when I asked them the exact same question, what does your community want and need? Many of them said the public housing or like something about their housing situation was absolutely horrible. So some of them were living in multi-generational, like one-bedroom, poorly maintained project buildings. At the time, there was this whole like brouhaha in the city of Richmond about how public housing was being funded and people were being evicted. It was bad. So I was really intrigued by this, but then I was also like, how do we take on public housing as a class of, like, I don't know how to do that. And so we instead started asking about where we could have an impact. And sort of serendipitously, right around that same time, I got an email from this organization called Opportunity Village, which is in Oregon, actually. And they took over a mobile home park, and they turned it into a transitional housing facility for homeless individuals. So they have 25 plots where there used to be a mobile home in each one. And they built, as a community, they built these little tiny houses. So like if any of you are into the tiny homes movement thing, they're about that size. So when we were on the phone with them, this is one of the actual homes. When we were on the phone with them, they said, you know, we have 25 plots, but we only have 24 houses. And I was like, ha-ha, we will build you your 25th. And so we put them on as a partner and a client. And what was so amazing is my students, for whom housing is very personal, like many of them had stories about, some of them had been foster children, some of them have been homeless, many of them live in very horrible housing conditions, some of them live between multiple homes. And so they brought a level of like consideration and dignity to this process that was so far beyond what I expected. I think there's this like really awful thing that we sometimes do as humanitarian designers where we say, oh, well, it's good enough for them, whoever the them is. Like, oh, I'm not going to live in it, but it's good enough for them, which is horrible. And that never happened in the project. And I was so proud of my students for considering that they really wanted to build something that was beautiful, that was dignified, and was a place that they would also be willing to and want to live in. So same thing as the farmer's market, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of models, learning how to talk about our work. This is something that I'm sure you're all continuing to hone as a skill, like how do you talk about your work and defend it in front of people who maybe are not super on board with what you're doing, but then also being open to criticism and taking the best parts of people's opinions and making your work better. And then, so this particular class, I had 85 students in 4 class periods, and the class periods were 65 minutes long. So I basically had 4 different construction crews for an hour a day, which is the worst possible way to try to build anything. So we had to, there was this great design challenge where I said to them, all right, like we can't do like a normal construction document set because we have this like weird rotation of construction crews. So we did this step-by-step framing plan where any student could come in at any moment and know exactly where they were and pick up where they left off. So we actually ended up doing 2 houses. We did a fundraiser and we had enough to do 2. So we did these like little mirror image Siamese twin homes, one that went to this organization and one that we auctioned off. So this is one of the 2. This is the other of the 2. You'll see them together in a minute. So at this point, you know, we're building this thing, but we still have to be making decisions about like kind of impromptu decisions as we're building it about how to make this thing as beautiful as we want it to be. And if anyone's tried to take apart a pallet, you know how horrible they are. I probably have tetanus from all the pallets I've tried to take apart in my life. And so my students decided that they wanted the siding to be pallet wood. And I was like, guys, please, no, anything but pallet wood. And one of my students, his father works in a warehouse, and said, well, I have 250 pallets, I'll give them to you. Well, that's a hard thing to argue with. So we ended up with 250 pallets, and I made my students this deal. I was like, look, you guys care about this project so deeply. I hate pallet wood so deeply. So you can use it, but I'm not touching it, and you have to make it perfect. That's like all I said. So the next thing I know, like a couple of days go by, and all of the pallets are taken apart, trimmed down, cut down. Some of them are stained, and we use it as a pallet wood, and they've like pieced it together in this really beautiful puzzle, like jigsaw puzzle of different colors and shapes. And then this is the final house with the pallet wood siding that I don't hate. It looks so good. And then the inside, so again, like we're building this for an actual client, for Opportunity Village. And the only instruction that they gave us is that we couldn't have plumbing or couldn't have a kitchen or a bathroom in the house because those are shared services that everyone in their living community shares. And they said that they didn't want this to be like a tricked out house. That being said, we easily had space to do that. Like this is actually far roomier than I thought. So it's just a bed and some storage, and it is electrically wired. If you can plug it in the same way you can. And then these are the two houses in twin mirror image of each other. The one thing I love about this project is if you remember when I was talking about the chicken coop, and the very first day I said, draw me a chicken coop, and I got a square with a roof over it. And that's kind of what these two look like when they're pushed together. We had a conversation about that, and it was so, like, teenagers, they were so poetic. They were like, well, you know, I know we don't want it to look ordinary, but actually, perhaps if you're homeless and the idea of a home in your head looks like this, then maybe that's the exact right decision to make. So it was this like really thoughtful homage to that like archetypal form without being that exact form. So one of them went to Opportunity Village. This is the actual house and the actual person who's living in it. And then the other one was, we sold it at a very discounted price to a single mother and her daughter who live in Southern California. So anyway, I was really proud of my students for taking this project so personally. And they really brought their own stories and their own traumas even to the considerations of this design. So the sentence that I said about intimacy being the path to impact, I totally believe that my knowledge of my students' lived experience and then also my students' consideration of our clients' lived experiences made this project really meaningful. It's a beautiful house, like I'm very proud of it, but I'm more proud of the decisions that my students made along the way that were so human-centered and that were not shying away from their own lived experience, but were actually informed by them. Okay, so then also this is like the architecture student, the architect in me. I also study product design. I believe in design with a capital D, but I also really deeply believe in the importance of space, like having physical spaces that are inhabited by groups of people doing specific things. And I also believe that there is a very small sliver of the population that gets to make the decisions about what spaces exist, and that authorship needs to change. So the year, actually this is the year before we did the tiny home, some of the parents at the charter school, which is also a middle school, some of the middle school parents said, how come this is only a high school program? Can you teach this to middle school students? And I was like, 8th graders are terrifying, and 8th graders with power tools are even more terrifying, and I want nothing to do with them, but sure. So that's how I became a middle school teacher. There's a pattern here. Yeah, so anyway, these are some of my, I'm laughing because these are unruly 3 students that I've ever had, but I love them to death. So I asked the exact same question. This is always where we start. What does the community want and need? And the middle school campus of the charter school did not have a library. And so all the students said, why don't we have a library? We want a library. And I said, okay, great, that's our project. Let's go build a library. So there's an empty room in the school that had been programmed to be the library, but then the school ran out of money and wasn't able to build it out as such. So I took my students to the public library. Many of them had not been to the public library, and I asked them, what do you want your library to look like? Or what do you want your library to not look like? And they all said, we don't want it to look like this. And I was like, what do you mean? This is an amazing library. It's like the Berkeley Public Library. They said, well, it's too boring. Okay, what do you mean by boring? And they meant that it was a place of reference. They're like, you go in and you have to talk to the librarian or look up like Kill a Mockingbird, and then you find a code, and then you go find a book, and then you leave. And I was like, all right, that's valid. That's what happens when you're in a reference place. But what would you want your library to be? And they said we want it to be a place of discovery and exploration, and not of like linear knowledge. This is me interpreting their words. They did not use that terminology. Highly impressive. So I said, okay, they did use the word discovery. They said they wanted it to be a place where they could figure stuff out and learn stuff and discover things. Great. So what does that mean spatially? Like, how do you take the concept of discovery, and if those shelves are a representation of reference, then what is the equivalent representation of discovery? So they made these hundreds and hundreds of these like cute little models. I love that they labeled every single one book. That was unclear. Okay, so what does that look like as a shelf? What does that look like as a space? Like, we had the room that we had was this like long, skinny room. It's like really weird to space plan. So how do you plan that space such that it feels like a place of discovery and not just like a long corridor filled with books? So then a colleague of mine lent us his like $500,000 CNC router, and we had this epiphany as a group. So like 108 eighth graders and myself and a co-instructor. One of the eighth graders said to us, you know, Miss Emily, there's 108 of us. How are we going to decide on one library? Like, I have no idea. And he said, well, what if we, instead of doing a whole library, can we make like something smaller? He said a Lego, like a version of a Lego that we can put together in a lot of different ways. I was like, that's really smart, like a system. Let's design a system rather than a space. So we came up with this module, this unit, which was supposed to be like this. It was supposed to be at a right angle that you could lock together. But when we made one, it's 2 pieces that slot together like this. And we sat it down, we looked at it, and we were like, oh, that's much more interesting. Let's make our shelves 45-degree angles. And one of my other also brilliant students said, well, Miss Emily, we're learning algebra in Miss Faye's class, and X is the unknown, so like this is the place where you go for the stuff you don't know. I was like, you are hired. So smart. So we started calling this the library the X space, and it's still called X space. So this is the unit. You can assemble them in so many different ways. You can put them together as a small shelf, a large shelf. I don't know if you can tell, but some of them have a concave front and some have a convex front. So when you put them together, they make this wavelength facade. You can make a shelf/bench. You can make a table, it's like double-sided table with a barrier in the middle. Run them along the entire length of the room. We actually did this as a mock-up. We invited some of the 6th and 7th graders in for a readathon. This space is like far from done, but we just wanted other students aside from 8th graders to come in and experience the place as a place of reading for the first time. We did a pop-up exhibition of student zines. And then as this is all unfolding, I'm realizing like there's a lot of things they want to do with this space and with these modules, not just the library. So, long story short, this is what the room looked like exactly a year ago. And this is the final version there. Like, this is our library. They framed out some of the some of the shelves. We have this whole central table. They did this really cool mosaic photo thing on the side. This is the detail of the shelf. But actually, since then, this is a year ago, I went in there like a week ago, it looks nothing like this. One of these shelves is missing. There's a new shelf over there with comic books on it. And so the architecture person in me was like, I hate this. Like, what? It's different. This is the final thing. Like, that's the photo. The photo. Like, you don't get to alter it. But what has happened since then is exactly what they wanted in the first place. That they are able to manipulate the space and edit it and discover things. By physically taking it apart, putting them back together. They could decide tomorrow that they want an entire new section, like only for Spanish language novels, and they can build a shelf for that. So every time I go in here, it looks and feels different. And while I want it to be this fixed, beautiful thing, the fact that this was designed and built, continues to be designed and built by its own students, I think is one of the most successful projects that we've done. It achieved the thing that they wanted. And it is a physical space that they feel like is theirs. Like, if you ask the 8th graders who built this, they're like, that's our library. We built that. Not the current 8th graders, we built it. So they really feel like that's their space. And I can't think of, I'm thinking back to when I was in middle school, I didn't feel like any space was my space, even my own classroom. I think that the creation of physical space for young people can like really change the way you think about your own power in the world. Okay, and then just lastly, this is a shorter one, but my last thought. So I was at the University of Nebraska like about a month ago in the School of Architecture, and it was 2 days after the election. Or actually, no, the election was 2 days after the election. And so I wasn't sure how to approach that or even to like bring up the subject with students. But I realized like an hour before giving my talk that everything that we do as designers or as builders or as architects, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, is political. The things that you choose to work on say something about what you're choosing not to work on. And the way in which you work means that there's a way in which you're not working. And so any creative decision you make, it is political. It involves people, it involves the environment, it involves your voice and your identity. So I think it would be a disservice to our own work to not acknowledge that. So I say that only because this last story, over the course of teaching Studio H and working with many ages of students, I had one kind of like overarching, I had many observations, but one was specific to the way in which my female students engaged when they were just with me, versus how they engaged when they were in a larger co-ed environment. And at first I thought this was just like one class, my farmer's market class. I'm like, well, it's probably just these girls. And then I saw it again the next year, and the next year, and the next year. And it was true across race, it was true across grade level, that when the students were working, the female students were working with only me, in an all-female group, they were more audacious, they were more vocal, they would volunteer to use tools, they knew how to use tools, they weren't afraid of saying they knew how to use tools, and when we went back to the co-ed environment, there was an immediate censorship of all those things. And I would look at them like, you just said the answer to me 5 minutes ago, like what's going on here? So there was that, and there was also my own experience. I grew up as a young person wanting to build stuff. I am still a person who wants to build stuff, and I often find myself in situations where I look around, I'm like, there's not a girl in sight. Why is that? And why are those spaces not conducive to more gender parity? So, my last little brief story is that with that frustration and observation in mind, I created a program called Girls Garage, which is for younger girls, so like 9 to 13, although now we're going up to 16. And I wanted to just make a space and a program for only girls to come and do all the things that they had either implicitly or explicitly been told that they shouldn't do, including going in the garage and taking your dad's tools and building something, or learning how to weld, or whatever the thing is, I wanted to do all of those things. This is Amber and Fiona. They're both 9 years old. We start with like the very basics of how to hold and swing a hammer, which everyone thinks they know how to do, but very few people actually know how to do correctly. So we teach that. We do a basic carpentry unit. This is like, there's a progression, so the very beginning is just basic tool knowledge. We build 90-degree angle birdhouses. The only rule is, so you get fence board and you have to assemble everything on a 90-degree angle using a brad nailer, a chop saw, a drill press, a sander, etc. Of course, they all break the rules and not everything is on a 90-degree angle. It's still beautiful. And then we learn how to weld. Welding is my favorite thing on the planet. We teach just like very introductory MIG welding. Turns out 9-year-old girls are really good at welding. They're like just the right amount of cautious and just the right amount of fearless. And so then in this progression, the first thing I ask them to do is to learn a few basic skills, and then I ask them, okay, how do you make something that's meaningful to you and only you? So their first challenge is to design a graphic symbol using only 4 pieces of steel that represents the meaning of their family name. So some of them don't know the meaning of their family name, they have to look it up. You also only get 4 pieces, you don't get 3, you don't get 5, you get 4. And you have to weld them together and then come up with a color scheme and make your symbol. So this is Erica's. Her middle name is Noelle, and so Erica means royalty, and then Noelle means Christmas or birthday, so she made this candle-shaped thing and called it Confetti Kingdom. Again, like the conceptual, like really top-notch. Anyway, so this is like the first thing I ask them to do. You know how to use the tool. Well, that's easy. I can teach you how to use the tool. Now make it meaningful for yourself. And then make it meaningful for you as a group. So as a group of young girls, knowing how to do these things, how can you work together to make something that's meaningful to all of you? So Erica, again, who's wearing the welding knowledge, she's second from the right. This was on a day of summer camp when everyone finished early. And Erica said, can I go weld? And I said, well, I don't really want you out there by yourself, and take these 8 girls and go do something together. You're in charge. And she's a really good welder, so it's like, don't worry about it. Everyone was fine. And so she took these girls and they had all this scrap metal and they made this sign that says fearless. It was all just flat stock steel that they welded with this really beautiful sign. So we can do things that are meaningful to us. We can do things that are meaningful as a group. And then how about things that are meaningful beyond our walls and our community? So one of our partners is the Women's Daytime Drop-In Center, which is a women's shelter for homeless and abused women. And actually Amber, who is the second from the left, she's in that first image, she, at the time, was living there with her mother. So she came to camp and we built a bunch of furniture for the women's center. So you may recognize these bookshelves. So you took some leftovers. So we made a bookshelf. These are all things that we made for the women's shelter. We redid their outdoor garden. We did the square foot gardening technique and turned it into an edible garden. We did a concrete top coffee table. And we built a playhouse for the children who were living there with their mothers. And then we finished early because we're awesome like that. And then we built random stuff that we wanted to build as gifts. So I literally said to these girls, okay, we're done. What do you want to make for someone else? And this is what they came up with. There's a cat house, there's a skateboard, there's 2 little tiny library book things. This thing in the front that looks like a suitcase is a Lego organizer. The one behind it with the like crisscrosses is a garden tool organizer. So sometimes we can make stuff just because we can, and not even for ourselves, but to give away. And then just lastly, so kind of back to my previous point about creating space, I also believe very strongly that it is more than okay and is actually quite important to create spaces for specific communities and groups to feel included. And I mean physical spaces. So this program for the first 3 years was borrowing the classroom space from our high school program. And then after a certain point, I had 150 girls on my waiting list. And was like, all right, we have outgrown the space, we need our own space. So I just opened a brand new space only for the girls program. It's called Girls Garage. It is an actual garage. And this is our tagline. This is where we do all of our work now, after school and summer and weekend workshops. and it's a physical space. And every girl has their name on the wall when they walk in. So they know that it's also their space. So I'll just end with this image. This was the last day we just finished our fall programming. This is the last day of the intro to carpentry class. And so this was like a little fun project they did at the end. They made spoons, they made gumball machines, and then they made these little robots. And so this is 2 days after the election. I took this picture. And I went back and looked at it, and I love, my favorite part is the girl on the right. Her little facial expression is like, I'm adorable, and I'm super cute, and I will kill you. And so that is what I want the takeaway to be for young girls, that there aren't any barriers, that you can be a girl, and you can be feminine in whatever way that means to you, and you can also do everything and anything. And that is the face you carry out into the world. So I'll just end with that. And I will also just, I saw some of your work earlier, and I have heard through many people that there's a lot of interest from all of you in doing this type of work. So my email is emily@projectdesign.org, and I would be happy to talk to you individually. And I also just want to end with a word of encouragement that it can feel like this is hard work to do, that there's no way to do it without being broke. There are ways to do it, and I just encourage you to have an understanding of who you are as a person and the kind of work you want to do and how you want to do that work, and to not ever sacrifice that. Thank you.
So the question would be, when you open the door for